I finally got my schedule good enough to get out here and do this. So, wait for some people to come on. Sean, Craig, Dave, Derek, how you been? Darren. Oh, it's kind of cold in the garage. I got my Mr. Buddy heater going, so hopefully it'll warm up a little bit. We'll let a few more people come on. Is everybody hearing me good? Somebody give me a shout. Let me know if you can hear me. Brandon, how you doing? If anybody's looking for custom rods, get a hold of Brandon. Make some killer stuff. I got an ice fishing rod from him. Really liking that thing, so keep up the good work. All right, so I'm going to try to touch base on as much as I can on Lake Macatawa. Try to answer as many questions as I can as we go along. So I got a few requests kind of to cover basically, you know, what, when, and per season kind of thing. I will start off and say I don't do a ton of ice fishing out there. Probably, you know, if I'm gonna target walleye through ice, I usually will go somewhere other than Lake Mac. It's super tough in the winter. If I'm out there, I'm usually after perch, honestly. I don't know. That lake gets so jam-packed full of different bait fish that, man, it just makes it real tough to dial in on walleyes out there. When I have done it, I use tip-ups quite a bit. Jigging, usually jig like buckshot spoons, tip it with a minnow head, that kind of stuff, and look for those like break lines off of flats, especially ones that were, you know, not the real steep drop-offs necessarily, but I'll look for the corners that taper a little bit more. You know, something that's coming 8 foot and then it's sliding down to 20. So you get, you know, much wider contours if you're looking at a map. I'll get into I got a paper map book. Now I'll kind of touch base a little bit more when I get that map out. And I'll go through some of those spots as far as ice fishing. The handful of spots that I have targeted in the past as far as that goes. But I think I'm gonna just start right off in basically in the spring. We'll go from spring and then move our way along, I guess, from there. You know, Lake Macatawa is a really tough lake simply because it's pretty dirty. It's just a pretty stained water. A lot of people have been out there and, you know, they call it chocolate milk. Yeah, that's when it's really dirty. You know, it almost looks like chocolate milk, and then you might as well look for somewhere else. It gets really tough when it's like that. But that lake is just stained water all the time. So you know, it makes it a little bit more difficult. It's not like fishing Muskegon. Muskegon's a little more clear. I don't know, I find your more natural type color baits and even darker colored baits, I think, leave a better profile, and especially stuff with rattles. But as far as spring goes, I will get out there as soon as I can get my boat in, so ice out. I've been out there in my boat before and dodged a lot of ice chunks still floating around that early. I've been out around the pier heads. When I'm talking like real early, I'm not in Lake Mac, so to say. I'm going and I'm fishing basically from the beach. If you drew a straight line across the channel where the beach is, on either side, I'm targeting that wider point of the actual breakwaters, pier heads. Staying out there because that's the only legal place you can be until last Saturday, April. So, and I think I've done another video over the summer, and I talked about how the fish are typically really high in the water column. I find that even in March, beginning in April, middle of April, I'm still running really high in the water column. I'll even go in Lake Michigan, and I'll actually go and have my planer boards at times in that last little sandbar between the beach and that first sandbar out, and I'll just zigzag pulling. A lot of times I'll be doing shallow husky jerks or thunder sticks. And in the spring, I'm usually, bear with me, I'm kind of looking around for this one right here, husky jerk. This one's pretty beat up, but this is the old standard. And I find that this lure, a shallow husky, I catch probably 60 to 70% of my walleyes that early in the spring come on this color. It's just something about it. It just smashes them. I do this size, and then I'll do the next size up. What is that? 11 or whatever I think it is. But again, I'm running those shallow huskies. I'm running them as shallow as 18 feet behind the board. And I'm zigzagging. I'm constantly going side to side. That's also my preference. I find a tiller boat gives me the option to cut much harder. Combining my steering with my tiller and my steering with my bow mount, I try to stall out. The inside board on turns, and in most cases, that's when they end up taking that bait. That thing is actually probably either sitting still or barely moving. And that early spring like that works very, very well for me. I also do a little bit of casting that time of year. Like if I see on my electronics, I see that there's a good pile of fish right in the corner of the breakwaters, like big red, back in those corners, those fish will pile up in there at times. Me and Dave Howding actually did that earlier summertime, actually, where we got in that corner and cast. And that can be really productive, really early spring there too. And that's a lot of fun. There's just something about casting crankbaits and catching, big walleyes. And I'm talking like 5 to 8 pounders usually. So that gets really fun. Bear with me, I'm trying to warm up a little bit, kind of shivering in here, but so yeah, I don't know, early spring I'm pulling those shallow huskies, thunder sticks. I'm doing that kind of thing. I'm looking for a bait that is not real crazy, not a real crazy action to it, just something real subtle, real smooth. So when you get into opening season, the season opens in the end of April going into May, then you got a little more room to wiggle as far as Lake Mac goes. So I could sit here and I could point out, go to this spot, go to that spot, and there's going to be pockets of fish usually on every one of those areas. And I can sit here and say, you got to be here this season, you got to be here. And that's not really how it's not how Lake Mac works. It's not how any lake really works. But these fish move a lot out there, and I think that has a huge part of the large amount of bait fish in that lake is insane. It's just crazy amount of fish. And I spend a lot of time looking. I spend a ton of time on my electronics, looking for those fish. Not really the ones down low. I'm not looking for fish. If I'm in the far west end, Van Andels Dock, and over in that section, I'm not looking for marks on the bottom. I'm not looking for fish at 20 feet down. I'm looking for those marks that are like 12, 10. If I see some at 8, I get really excited. Those fish up there, for whatever reason, those are your active fish. Those are the fish that are out searching for food. So when you're looking at your electronics out there, especially, getting back to, when you get into that opening season, April, May, the end of April and May, you're going to have a big concentration of fish that are going to hold up along the shipping channel, especially towards the west end of the lake. You got fish coming back, you got fish congregating in that channel, and they're going to slide in and out, in and out, in and out, especially depending on water temps. The lake warms up fairly quickly in the spring. Doesn't take as long as others. So the bait fish will be scattered, and they'll just be everywhere, and they'll be up higher in that water column. With that stained water, I think that's the advantage for the walleyes, and they tend to hang that high in the water column regularly. It's not like you don't go out there and then see a bunch of fish on bottom, and then all of a sudden they just come flying up and start feeding. They hang suspended pretty much year round. I don't really ever target fish along the bottom out there all the year, the whole year through, except for ice fishing season. Then I'll try to stay more focused towards the bottom there. But fall, summer, and spring, I'm looking for those suspended fish up high. And I think that I think that's part of why a lot of people struggle out there. I think they run their crankbaits if they're trolling. I think they're running them too low. I really do. I think when you're picking out that heavier amount of fish that's, you know, say 28 foot of water, and at 20, 22 to 24, there seems to be a huge amount of fish. I don't waste much time with those. I find that if I do, I'm dealing with sheephead, and I'm dealing with lots of sheephead, and I think that's part of it out there. I think the walleyes are above those sheephead, catfish, and they just stay up higher around that bait with that stained water. I mean, they have the full advantage all day through. Another thing, I'm talking about that advantage. I find that mornings can be good out there, but I have found like 11 a.m. to like 2 p.m. that time slot, for whatever reason, is always really good. It produces really well, especially when you get into June and July. That time frame is usually really phenomenal. Just something about it. I have not fished on other lakes where that afternoon bite is the best bite of the day. Now you get into after dark out there, and you get another really good time slot, when dark falls. But if I'm out there in the mornings, I'll start off with jigging. I'll jig a Hopkins spoons, blade baits, Northland whistle jigs. With a whistle jig, I put a crawler on it, usually a half crawler. And then I'm targeting the same kind of stuff, though. I'm looking for a little shallower water that has fish still suspended. So what I'm doing is I'm pitching it in. If I'm using the whistle jig, I'll pitch it, and I'll do a really big long sweep, and I'll have that thing come 5-6 foot up, and I'll be fishing typically anywhere from 8 to 12 foot of water, and I'll be somewhere close to a pretty big drop off, like so. OBI flat is a prime example of that. The flat that's behind the green light pole out in the middle of the west end. Those are key areas for pitching that kind of a jig. Even over by like Blue Roof along the South Shore line, that can be really good also. There's not a whole lot of structure out there, so you're looking for a lot of drop-offs, points, that kind of stuff. But that lake, it does not have a whole lot of your classic walleye structure in it. It's vastly sand and some soft bottom, a lot of zebra mussels, but it's vastly sand out there. So yeah, so anybody have any questions so far? I wasn't really watching too much, but I can kind of go through some baits as far as going into that later spring, beginning of summer time frame. Again, I run a lot of husky jerks, both shallow and deep. I can probably show you some of the hotter colors that I have found. Bear with me. I try to get all kinds of stuff out. It looks more like a mess than anything, but so this is a good color. Tried and true. I'm sure everybody's got at least one of these laying around. That works really well. That and a shad wrap also works very well in that color as well. So again, I run a lot of that still. I run that deep diver, not far back behind the boards either. Typically somewhere between 30 and 40 feet behind the board, so I'm not going real deep with it. Sometimes I've gone as shallow as 20. I've done like 20 feet behind the board on a deep diving husky, and that's just what produces for me. Another one I don't think a lot of people use, and I have found this bait to be pretty good too, especially May, June, is the minnow wrap. Now this is a number 9, but I have it in this color and standard perch color. And that lure, if I'm not doing well on husky jerk or thunder sticks, I go to that minnow wrap. That just has just a slightly different style of action to it, and sometimes it's just those key little things. Just changing up some kind of an action. Maybe going to an actual smaller profile works at times as well. Hottentots. Hottentots are good in July. I have a lot of luck in July with those. Yeah. Last year I ran a ton of flicker shads. I never really fished much with flicker shads up until 2 years ago, and last year I ran jointed flicker shad number 7s and the standards from June and middle of June all the way through August, and that lure produced most of my fish. And I was running it mostly up on the flats, and anywhere from 8 to, well, I shouldn't say that, probably 6 to 12 foot of water. The primary slot was 7 to 9. Was probably the more dialed in depth up on those flats. And I was running them about 30-35 feet behind boards at 2.5 to 2.7 miles an hour, and a lot of people thought I was nuts. How I kind of got on the kick of speeding up to that kind of range. It's kind of funny. My younger brother, he's more of a bass fisherman. He came out with his son and daughter in his flat bottom. He's just got a really old Minn Kota bottom out on it. It's like a 40-pound thrust, and he's got a 20 horse Johnson 2-stroke on the back. So he comes out trolling for walleyes, and he's just running his bait casting rods and reels, casting it out about as far as he thought he should be. And he was running number 5 flicker shads. And I was out there at the same time, and he was running probably 2.5, 2.7, somewhere in there. And I was running that typical 1.8. And they caught 9 that night, and I caught 3. And I didn't like that. I didn't like that at all. So that's how I got on that kick of going faster. Started paying attention to some of those other little details. Sometimes when people are out there and you start noticing a boat is throwing the net in the water a lot, it may not be the bait. It may just be flat out speed. So I know I told a lot of people that last summer, the speed I was going. I think a lot of them thought I was crazy, and I don't think a lot of them went that fast. And they kept saying they would get 1 or 2 here and there, and you know, the other people that were getting faster speeds were doing well. I know Dave Howding was ripping along out there with his boat, and he did very well in the same areas, but he was running shad wraps for the most part. So again, similar bait, but don't get too hung up on, you know, this is the magic bait. I don't think that there's such a thing as a full-on magic bait. You're just trying to match what's going on in the lake at that time of year. So if you think of May, June, a lot of the bait fish in there are not very big. A ton of shad out there. There's a ton of perch. And a whole bunch of different kind of shiners. Those are your big groups of bait fish out there. So like when you get up on the flats in June, running crawler harnesses can work well. There again, I'm trying to get the most active fish, trying to find the most active pods of fish. Now I could go with that crawler harness and a bottom bouncer, and I could go grind it out in your typical places out there that most people have heard of. They're even written in my map book. You know, you could go all the way to the east, go in front of Hines. That's another spot that probably doesn't get near the attention that it used to back 20-25 years. I'm trying not to get too off course, but as I do this, I have so much stuff that runs through my head, so bear with me if I'm jumping around. But when I first started fishing out there with my dad, I was like 12 years old, so it's 30 years ago. But when we went out there and we fished for walleyes, and everybody else was fishing walleyes out there, it was pretty rare to see anybody actually fishing the west side of the lake. Almost everybody fished the east. And what I mean by east is from the narrows of the lake to the east to Riverhead Bridge. That was really where everybody was fishing walleyes. In front of Hines, Pine Creek Bay, there's a really nice kind of sunken point in Pine Creek Bay that it does not get enough credit. If you get up in there, again, back in, you know, I'm still trying to stay in that May range, even beginning of June. The underwater point in Pine Creek Bay, it can be really good. It can hold a ton of fish. You got, especially with the higher waters that we have past couple of years, there's quite a few walleye that go up into Pine Creek Bay and then into the creek to go and spawn. So you got a lot of pike, a lot of muskie that come back out of there from spawning as well. So it's kind of a congregate area. I'll slide back to that sunken point. On the south end of it, it drops off to, well, I don't know, 16 to 20 foot. And then on the northern part of it, towards the bay more, that stays in that 12-foot range. So, and the top of it is probably 4 to 5 foot deep. So it's a pretty nice underwater point that is an area that you should look at. You should at least give it a look, especially in May and June. And that can be a really good area if you like running crawler harnesses. If you like dealing with night crawlers all day, then that's a really good place to focus in on this Pine Creek Bay. It's a kind of a big, it's not big, but it's a large area to cover, but there are some key points to it. That underwater point in the bay, and way to the north of it, it kind of narrows down and then it widens back out. And that narrow part is pretty channeled out from the current. There's enough current coming out of Pine Creek there that it stays about, like again with the higher waters, it's about 13 foot right in that little narrowed down spot, and there's usually always current there. And them fish like to stack up in there as well when they're sliding back. It's another spot that you got to remember for the fall. Pine Creek Bay is definitely something to look at. Spring, early summer, when the spawners are still sliding back and trying to feed up. All depends on water temps too. If you're starting to see your water temps are getting into, upper 60s, that Pine Creek Bay area, that narrow part of it is probably not going to be as many fish there anymore. Now, if you're talking, 50, 55 to that 62, 63 mark, I would definitely be looking around in those areas there. So going, June, I'm kind of shifting gears usually. I'm looking for a little bit more erratic baits. I might start running some hot tots. I'll start getting into the shad baits a little bit more, and I'll focus in on Hines a little bit. That whole north shore between Hines and Pine Creek Bay, along that drop off along there is also a decent spot to look early in the year. But once the middle of June and that water gets to that 70 mark, I'm really focusing in on the flats on the west end. Those fish are going to be up there the whole summer long. There's just a little bit of grass up on those flats. Nothing real major. There's one bigger weed bed. If you're familiar with it at all, I'll get the map out and I'll show you in more detail that way. But there's a red and a green buoy can. Just to the west of the green buoy, there's a pretty good weed bed that comes up to Chippewa Road. It's kind of a point. There's a weed bed there, but Other than that, those flats are pretty free of weeds. So I'm running little shad baits, like I said, 30-40 feet behind the board, and I'm pounding them into bottom, and I'm usually going pretty quick, anywhere from 1.8 all the way to 2.5, 2.7. So I'm cooking along pretty good up there. So again, I find that the afternoon bite is really good up there in summer. All the traffic, all the boat traffic, you can barely stand up in your boat at times. It's an insane amount of big boats kicking up weight, going on both sides of you. I've had it where 3 boards go back and I'm just struggling to stand in my boat. It's that much boat traffic. I don't know why that happens, but it almost seems like it triggers them fish even more. It's very odd, but yeah. The shallow flats, I think, are probably one of the biggest producers up there. If you like drifting crawlers, if you get the right winds, you can drift crawlers across that flat and produce as well. I don't do a ton of live bait stuff. I do a little bit in Kalamazoo River. I use a lot of crawlers. I don't want to get too off hand on that. So, but if I get if there's a pretty good southeast wind, and there are times in June, middle of June, into July, where if the fish are really seem to be stacked up right on the edge of that flat, where they seem like they're literally, you can barely see them on your electronics right against that side, then that would be a time where I might try drifting crawlers. This is kind of an old timers rig, but just a standard number 2 hook, and I just run it to a 3-way swivel, usually about 2 foot usually, and then I'll do about a foot dropper, and I just throw a fireball jig on it, tip them both with a crawler. And again, this is something I use with south wind or southeast, and I'm going to start in the deeper water to the south of the OBI flats, and I'm going to just let the wind push me up onto that flat, and as you come up that drop off, and that's usually where they'll get you. They'll hammer you right along the edge. That can work really good if you're somebody that likes live bait stuff. And that's one way I do it up there. Again, that's another time I might get whistler jig out, and again, I tip that with a half a crawler most of the time, sometimes a whole crawler, depending on the fish. If they tell me they're gluttonous and they prefer a whole crawler, then I'll put a whole crawler on it. But yeah, you can, like I said, if you like dragging crawlers, I know a ton of people that do that. So I have not, Travis, well, I'll start with, what size weight do I run with that harness, that 3-way setup? Depending on the wind speed, you just kind of, you gotta try to keep contact with bottom. with your line at roughly 45-degree or less angle from your boat out. So you're going to have to judge that based on the wind speed as you're drifting with it. So I'm usually either 1/8 ounce or 1/4 ounce. If it gets to a point where it's too windy to keep that line angle and contact with bottom, just letting it bump along, then I'll just call it quits with that rig. I don't continue trying to make that work with going heavier and heavier. I just don't. At that point, I'm just going to switch gears, and I'm going to try to run crankbaits more effectively. If I have to be crosswind, I'll just pick up the speed and just try to stay along the edge trolling crankbaits. But Travis has got one bait that more productive for walleye and less for sheephead. Honestly, I think it's more about speed than a bait. I have never found a bait that gets rid of sheephead out there. Never. Even with the 3-way crawler setup, you're gonna get sheephead. You're gonna get lots of sheephead. I think it's more about speed. I know when I got into that, once I crested 2.3 miles an hour trolling cranks, I got a whole lot less sheephead. So I would say out of the 96 walleyes I caught on OBI flat last summer, I may have caught a dozen or less sheephead. So I had quite a few big rips that stole my baits, and I'm pretty sure those were muskies. There was a handful of those caught up there the past couple of years as well. But as far as keeping sheephead away, I honestly think it's just the depth that you're running your bait. Again, up on that shallow flat, I don't think there's a ton of sheephead. Now, if you get off the side of it on that drop off, there's a ton of them that hang along there for sure. That's why, I guess that's why I continue to look at the higher water column all year through. I feel like you get away from all the junk fish, and you're getting those active walleyes. Unless I'm jigging a Hopkins spoon or a blade bait, it's the only time I'm really low in the water column. So, and I catch sheephead doing that too, unfortunately. So, I know a buddy of mine, he was casting gold Hopkins spoons, and they were just rip jigging them back up on the OBI flat, and they were just pounding walleyes doing that as well, which is something I have not tried that. I just haven't tried casting a Hopkins out and just aggressively ripping it back like that, but they did really well doing that. Something to keep in mind. So in summer, if you get you're getting into June, July, August, Lake Michigan flips over. It gets really cold, like upper 50s, mid 50s. I don't care if you gotta sell your soul to your boss. Go out, try to get out there, because when that happens, you get a huge influx of fish that will come flying into that channel and into Lake Mac, and that far west end by Van Andel's dock, all the way to the Coast Guard station, kind of that whole triangle over there. When that big lake flips over, you'll have just tremendous amount of big fish, and I'm talking a lot of 7 to 10 pounders, and you're going to get a ton of 5s too. But when that happens, it's pretty rare you get any fish under 5 pounds. I mean, last year on the flats, it was cookie cutter 21s, unless the big lake flipped over. That was the times when I got the most and continue to get the most of my 25 or better inch fish out there. A lot of my, I should rephrase that. I mean, all of my 27, 28, 29 inch fish all came out of a 100-yard spot just inside Lake Mac, from the channel. So it was always during a flip over when the lake flips. So that's a key time to get out there. If you can get off work, just to go for it. I check the water temp in the mornings every day before I go to work. So just something to keep in mind there. And if that cold water in that Lake Michigan stays for that kind of time, a long distance or a long stretch of time, excuse me, and that is coupled with just prior to that having a pretty big thunderstorm or a lot of rain, and you seem like you got a little more current coming down the shipping channel, don't be afraid to look along the south shoreline during that time. Those fish will stretch quite a ways in, as far as the South Shore Drive boat launch, Park Township boat launch. From there all the way back to the channel, they could be that deep or that far up into Lake Macatawa during that flip over. You just gotta have to pay attention on your electronics to see how far those groups are going. And again, I'm always targeting the suspended fish at that time as well. So when you get into the summer months, I do a lot of night fishing also. I tend to try to get out on the water if I go during the week. I tend to try to get out there by 8 o'clock, so I have a little daylight time. I do a lot of searching around, get some fishing in before dark, but the boat traffic dies off, and then it gets really, really good for sometimes 2 hours once dark hits. And one tip I can give you in the summer, if you're out there after dark, just shut your motor off. Just try to get real quiet, or go to your bow mount for a little while or whatever, and just listen. And if you hear fish, like bigger fish swirling on the surface, or if you hear small little splash noises, and you shine your flashlight or headlamp or whatever, and you notice little minnows actually shooting out of the water, that is the perfect place to be, because if those minnows are porpoising out of the water, they're trying to get away from a walleye. The big swirls and big fish swirling on the surface, those are huge walleyes. And you can get that occurring all over. I mean, I've seen it up on the OBI flat after dark doing that. Van Andel's dock over that area. In front of any creeks that come in. You got one over by Anchorage Marina up there, which is, I almost feel bad mentioning that, because I know there's a handful of guys. That's one of the spots that most people wouldn't even think about trying. But there's that little creek that goes under the road and comes into where their little boat crane is. And you can cast crankbaits. I know guys that cast MEP spinners. Yeah, MEP spinners. After dark. And try to get it all the way to that culvert where it goes under the road and catch some big walleyes up in there. And again, I'm talking in the summer, so but you got another big creek on the south side by Macatawa Yacht Club over there. Those are some of the key areas where you'll usually see those bigger fish swirling on the surface and all that. So I'm reading Travis's here a second. So when Lake Michigan gets cold out there, it's not that the fish are trying to get away from the cold water. It's not that the walleyes are trying to get away from the cold water. It's the bait fish that don't want to be in that cold water. So they're flying into Lake Mac. So if you got allies, you got any perch or anything like that, you got a lot of fish that are the bait fish are making a hard push into Lake Mac for warmer water, and more food source. So the walleyes just follow them. So if those big clouds of bait, they continue up into Lake Macatawa, like I said, as far as a mile, the walleyes will just keep following the bait. I mean, they're gluttonous. That's all they care about is eating. So that's what I found with Lake Michigan flipping over, Travis. I don't see it looks like your question is maybe a little bit longer, but anyway. Yeah. Kind of lost track of where I was there, so yeah, if the lake flips over, get out there. It's definitely worth it. A lot of guys, if you guys want to fish for them when the lake flips over from the channel or the pier heads, maybe some of you don't have boats. A lot of guys like to cast countdowns, or they'll use husky jerks. If you use a husky jerk, I would suggest doing a split shot a couple of foot above it, and then literally when it hits the water, you count to 10, count to 15, try some different counts before you start to retrieve it in, and just do a nice, easy, steady retrieve. Or you can try super fast, or whatever. I haven't done any fishing off the pier or channel in forever, so but I know that's what a lot of guys do when the lake flips over, that they're casting countdowns and huskies. Sometimes blade baits also work, but when you get into July also, again, if you like running crawler harnesses, I see my brother's on watching now, so he probably can remember this. In July, some years back, I don't know why I decided to try it, but we ran heavy bottom bouncers. I think we were doing like 2.5 ounce or 3 ounce bottom bouncers and crawler harnesses in the channel in July. And there's one little spot along the north wall of the channel it has just a slight little bend in it like this, and there's a rock pile right in that corner, and we went back and forth over that, and we pulled quite a few walleyes off there. Middle of the day, it was probably 90 something degrees. It was 4th of July boat traffic. Like we were only running 2 rods because there's so many boats, and we were getting yelled at constantly. But that's another spot if you like running crawler harnesses. You can try it in there too. So as far as crawler harnesses go, color wise, I find red beads work really well. Red and just a hammered silver plain spinner blade. I don't know why. I run purples, I run perch, chartreuse, colored blades, copper colored blades, and honestly, probably like 80% of the walleye I've ever caught on crawler harnesses in Lake Macatawa was red beads and a hammered silver blade. So, for example, I don't know if you can see it all that well, like this, basically, with that kind of a blade, and that's it. My tagged walleye I caught years back out there was a red bead, that crawler harness. I had 2 large split shots out of it. I had it 100 foot behind a planer board, and I was in 32 foot of water right by the south boat launch, the Park Township boat launch, just to the west of that. I caught it at I think it was 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, just suspended out there. So crawler harnesses work if you're someone that likes that versus crankbaits. I like trolling crankbaits. That's my favorite way to do it. That and casting, more and more. I've been getting more and more into casting. So yeah, when I start to get into fall, and that's a time where I don't fish as much in the fall. One of the biggest reasons is my other really bad addiction is goose and duck hunting, and I get really crazy into that, so I don't put the same amount of time into the fall fishing out there as I do spring and summer. But in the fall, if you go out there and you're not seeing like huge clouds of bait fish, continue to try for them. There's going to be a point in fall, late fall, November-ish, on Lake Macatawa, when you go out there and you see spots on your fish finder and you almost wonder if it's broken because it's so clouded up. That's a huge migratory move of shad into that lake for the winter, and you might as well just give up. When that happens, it gets really tough. Once the big schools of shad come in, it's similar on Muskegon from some of the guys I've talked to about Muskegon. When you get that huge influx of shad, it's difficult. Again, you can do when you get into fall. I'm still looking for shallower fish. I'm not looking for fish I'm not looking for walleyes in 24 to 28 foot. I'm sure that there's walleyes there. I just don't find that those fish are active enough. It goes back to I strongly believe it's the oxygen level in that lake, being that it's so stained, that I think the fish down low are not as active because it's just a much lower oxygen level down there, until you get that really hard flip over in the fall. But once that happens, that's when the shad are going to be there, and it just gets crazy hard. That's when I would rather just drive to Muskegon at that point. It just gets that tough. But if you if you're looking to target them in the fall, look back at the creek mouths. Look at Pine Creek Bay. You can throw crankbaits with some three-way setup, where you run a big bell sinker, or you can do trolling with snap weights. And I'm talking like, I don't know, 3 ounce, somewhere between 2 and 3 ounce snap weights, and running deep diving crankbaits. It's the same program as you would do elsewhere, as far as the types of lures. You're going to use typically bigger profile baits, bigger in the fall. So I don't know, I have been experimenting a little bit with some hair jigs in the fall, and looking for those fish on brake lines, they're right on the brakes, again off some of the flats, or blue roof. If you're not familiar with blue roof, it's on the south side of the lake. I'm pitching some hair jigs and just trying to snap jig them back. So I've been playing around with those with a little bit of success. Like I said, I just kind of got into trying that in the past couple seasons, but I have found these two to be pretty good colors. Find that this shiner, I think this is considered shiner, find this one actually to be the best. I do have some chartreuse ones. I don't think I've caught one on a chartreuse color pattern. I have not caught one on that yet. So but that black shiner color has been pretty decent. I put on occasion I have tipped it with small boot tail plastic as well, and just done more of a steady retrieve, and that worked out pretty well. I'll get this map out and kind of point out a few spots. If you're not familiar with the lake, I'll kind of go through some of the key terminology of where these different spots are. Like, people talk about Blue Rough, OBI Flat, over by Hines. If you're someone that's not familiar with the lake, then I'll try to point those areas out. Pine Creek Bay, all that stuff. So bear with me, I'll turn the camera around. Alright, I'm going to start over kind of on the east end here. Shoot, I don't have a pencil or nothing. So again, this is an old paper book, so it's not really necessarily up to date, but so you're going to have, Hines area over here. This is kind of a unique area. It's got some weird bottom structure to it. I don't know if it's from the old discharge water that they used to pump back into the lake there, but yeah, that area can be really good spring and all summer. It's another area I would look at if you're gonna ice fish. Now keep in mind, this is right off that shipping channel, so just use caution. This year, I don't think I'd ever, at this point, we'd have to get some really, really cold temps for me to feel good to even go out on Lake Mac at this point. But anyway, coming back, you see the different spots I have circled, all these little points, and there's some big culverts along in some of these areas here. Kind of see that creek dumps in out of culvert here. There's another one here. Me and my dad, way back, we used to do a lot of casting, original floating Rapellas, after dark, up around those culverts, and you would catch some very large walleyes in anywhere from a foot to 3 foot of water. So that's something to maybe look into if you're interested in that type of stuff. Pine Creek Bay, that's this whole section, and there's that point that comes out here. Again, this is an area in the spring, fall, and ice fishing. This is an area that you could definitely try. The one downfall I will say about Pine Creek Bay, if it gets dirty, it takes forever for that to clean out. It stays really, really dirty for a long time. The east end of the lake will stay dirtier than the west, so it just takes a lot longer to clean out. So that can be a real issue over on that end. But yeah, even along this edge right here, there's a lot of rock along the shore right here. This can be a really, really good spot to troll in the summer, early summer and midsummer. That can be another really good area to go to. I have also used Hopkins spoons and buckshot spoons, blade baits, and fished more out right off of that point there, and I've caught some off of that, off the tips of these points, Boschel vertical jigs, and pitched whistle jigs, or just regular jig and plastic. These are other good spots for that as well. Moving to the west. The west end is probably, I spend most of my time on the west end, but I'm gonna try to move this up here. Might be better. Anyway, so here's the South Shore Park Township boat launches over here. This is your red light pole, and this is your green one. So as you can see where I got these circles, ovals, this is one of the flats. A lot of people fish this and this, and this is where, like I said, when I said I got 96 walleyes off of OBI flat, that's this one right here. It's called OBI flat because there's a restaurant over here. It's called Outdoor Beach Inn Restaurant, OBI. It's as simple as that. So if you hear somebody say it and you're not sure where they're talking, that's this flat right here. So I'm targeting from this red buoy can. If you would basically draw a line across, that's the section I'm looking at. Especially this section through here, where the drop off gets much more gradual. It's an area where I find a lot of the fish, a lot of the walleyes will hang there. And again, south winds, south or southeast, even south-southwest. This area is a place that you want to go look. I didn't really touch on wind direction much so far tonight, but wind direction out on this lake plays a huge role on where I start and where I'm going to look for fish. Again, if you like drifting crawlers, this is the spot when I was talking earlier about that three-way deal, that three-way rig with crawlers. This would be the section that I would be trying to do that on with a south or southeast wind. If you get a southeast, you can carry this edge a little bit longer with your drift. It can be really productive that way. So, sorry I'm shaking so much. Cold in the garage tonight. But yeah, south winds is going to make both of these flats are going to get hot. Me and Dave Howding talked about this a lot last year. I said pay attention to the south winds. If it's not south winds, go fish that and see what you think. And it's funny, if you're not getting south winds for a while and you get north, this gets dead. The fish move. The bait moves, the fish move. North winds, I'm definitely going to be down along this south shoreline here, or even this little spot behind the red light pole with a northwest. This spot can get really good right in there. This little turn in right here is another little hidden gem. If you fish that, beware. There's a very thick weed bed. As soon as you get to the top of this drop off, it is a huge weed mat, and you're not getting through it with anything. So beware of that. But this little corner, you see this little 17 right off of that 8, 16. That little spot, and those are the kind of things I'm looking for out here. So those little weird depth variations adjacent to, those weeds. That's the kind of stuff I'm looking for. Over here, when I started off talking about ice fishing, this is a more gradual. This is definitely an area that I would be ice fishing. Again, over here as well. It's all kind of up towards Anchorage Marina. This is your state park DNR launch. So that section through there, I'm shaking like a leaf, I'm sorry guys. But yeah, ice fishing wise, here, this section here is pretty good. It's not that far of a walk from the boat launch. Chippewa Road. So from here out to this green buoy, there's a big weed bed in here as well. So use caution if you're up trolling especially July, August, that weed bed is big and it is thick. That's part of the problem with all the floating weeds out here in August. It's because all these people cut that corner with their pleasure boats and they're chewing the weeds up. That's why it gets so bad with floating weeds usually. So, here on the far west end, we got Van Andel's dock, which is right up in here, right before the channel. I'll tell you, I'm an open book, guys. I've said it, I've posted it many times. This, where it drops off from that new wooden fishing pier to this little fishing pier off of that new parking lot, that 100-yard stretch, every one of my 27, 28 to 30-inch fish, I'm not gonna lie, they all came off that same 100-yard stretch. Right at the end of my thumb. Right there. You can see why by Van Andel is a spot people like to jig. Comes up out of 20. Actually goes up into about 12 foot. And that's where the fish are. They're not jigging down in this 19, 20, 22. Probably some spots are 24 this year. They're not jigging Hopkins spoons in deep water. They're up on that 12 foot. You know, there's a little shallow spot off to the side of that dock. I don't even like to say it because I got Roy. He does a lot of fishing on that corner from shore. Man, that guy just kills them. He's really just kills them up there. So, that's Van Andel's up there, if you're not familiar with it. Here is the marina. I'm trying to find the creek here. So, the creek that comes in right here. And out in front of that, right out here, after a good hard thunderstorm, good rains, some north winds, that spot can get really good too. Right off the end of that dock system. That's definitely a spot to look for. You know, and I could do this all night. I posted a picture of my Naviatics on my phone. And you can barely see the map, so many waypoints. There's fish everywhere out here, people. These are just key spots where they're like confidence areas, okay? All depending on wind direction. That's what it is for me, sorry. Everywhere I fish out there is dependent on wind direction, bait, all your typical stuff. The biggest secret I have out there isn't necessarily the baits. It isn't anything out of the norm that you wouldn't do anywhere else. Besides, think and keep your head thinking, keeping everything up high. I think if you fish higher in the water column, meaning just below surface, whether it's the middle of the day or at night, I think you'll be really, really surprised how many more walleyes you're going to get out there. That has been my experience over all the years really that's I think what makes um, people more successful is just taking those, looking at the fish finder, and okay, figuring out what the fish are doing. You got to figure it out. If you got this constant line of fish just stacked like cordwood, but then, you know, in 22 foot of water, and then at 8 foot below the surface, you keep marking these big fish and these little pockets of bait. Why would you fish down by the... Everybody, I think, gets stuck on the numbers. When they see the numbers on their screen down there, they get so focused in on getting out their precision trolling app and going, I need a bait that's going to run 20. The problem is, in my experience, when I do that or have done that, and I've made that mistake many times, when I do that, I don't get anything but sheephead, catfish. I might get one walleye, and I'll almost not even see or not pay attention to the 6, the 7, the 9 fish that I marked at 8 foot below the surface in the same spot. If you start looking at those details out in Lake Mac with stained water, trying some things with some rattles like flicker shads, flicker minnows, and just going through some baits and seeing what kind of action they might want. I've also found I catch a lot more of my larger walleyes. If you're a trophy guy, if you want to catch a monster walleye, and that's what you like getting regularly, I have found the less erratic action baits trolled at night produce the biggest fish. The minnow wrap, original floating Rapella, just a simple Hottentot at times at 1 mile an hour. And again, I can't stress it enough, I never troll in a straight line. I'm always trying to zig and side to side, side to side, side to side. And if I start noticing that my outside board that's going much faster on my turn is picking up fish, I know you've probably all heard this before on YouTube and everyone else, but if that board picks it up, the fish regularly, I'm going to pick up my speed. And I'm going to keep picking up my speed. If I catch fish, I'm going to go up another 2 or 3 mile, 0.23 mile an hour or half mile an hour, and I'm going to keep increasing speed. As long as I'm getting fish, I'm going to keep increasing, because I'm just looking for the most active fish out there. There's so many fish in that lake that, I mean, you got to try to break it down. You got to break it down into a smaller, workable amount of fish. And that's where I'm convinced, in my success and experience over the years, those fish are from 10 foot to the surface, even in 30 foot of water. If I find that all my fish are coming at 10 foot, suspended out over the deeper areas, and that area dies out, I catch fish or they seem to have moved, I'm going to go look for like shallow flats, and I'm going to start looking at 12 foot of water and shallower. If I had fish active at 10 foot before, I'm not going to go looking for fish in 20 foot of water somewhere else. I'm going to stick with the same depth that I had previously. But I'm gonna look around, and that might be that they're just focusing in on the edges of those flats, and maybe they're heading up into, you know, that 4-5 foot of water. You never know. So I guess I know everybody wants to figure Lake Mac out, and I get tons of questions, and that's the biggest thing. I gotta stress it over and over and over is just staying higher in the water column is really the biggest secret. And maybe people are disappointed with that from me, but I don't have anything different than any of the rest of you. I mean, I don't have any special baits. I'm just like the rest of you. So I mean, I can show you for the most part. I mean, I'm no different than anyone else. I got Hottentots. You know, I just got baits. I got spoons, Hopkins spoons. I do both of those. I have nothing special. You all have the same stuff. It's all about depth and speed, figuring out speed. You know, Nick Dode talked about that color. You know, that works out there too. Not always, but at certain times, it sure does. If I could tell you one color of a bait that produces over and over and over is that silver I showed at the beginning. If I'm gonna do Hottentot colors, look how many of those I got. Here's a Thunderstick Junior, Deep Junior. This color, for some reason, man, it works very good out there. That was one of my dad's favorites. When my dad passed away, we found bags of Hottentots in his truck. And when we separated them all out, I think I don't know, he had like 20-something Hottentots of the same color. Why did he have so many? Because they worked. They still do. Something about that color works well. Again, Fire Tiger, Chartreuse stuff. The old standard silver and black, silver and blue, nothing special. So those are the things that I'm running out there, guys. It's nothing special. I'm not unique. I don't have hot baits. Same stuff you do. So I don't know. I've never tried a mag lip, Todd. I've never tried a mag lip one. I have a few X-Rod Magnums. Honestly, I haven't had a whole lot of success with those. So yeah. I don't know. Anybody got any specific other questions? I'm not even sure how long I've been going here, but probably been on quite a while. So feel free to, I mean, any of you can shoot me a PM. You can comment on here afterwards, you know, after the video and everything. I'll continue to answer questions. I'm an open book. I have no problems giving out my spots. and what I'm catching fish on. If I post a picture that I'm out there and I caught one, or I'm on them or whatever, you want to shoot me a PM, I'll tell you exactly where I am. I got no problem with that. I'm not one of those secretive guys. So I'm just looking to try to help everybody out in any way I can. Ever tried stinger spoons? No, I have not. Who was it? Somebody else was asking me about that a couple days ago, actually. And no, I have not. Anybody that has that's watching yet, give Darren some insight. Or Darren, do you use them? Have you had success? I feel like I was kind of rambling and off course tonight, so I apologize. I also apologize for last night. I double booked myself. Had a birthday party. Me and my wife went to, so I apologize for that. So, but yeah, if nobody else has got anything, I really appreciate you watching me. I hope I helped in some way. And if you have more questions, just keep commenting and I'll keep answering them. Thanks a lot, guys, and look forward to Chad Scott should be on next week. Hopefully he'll be all recovered back up from the coronavirus. No, he doesn't really have coronavirus, but he was feeling pretty crummy. So hopefully next week, Wednesday night, we'll have Chad Scott on here. So if you're not familiar with Chad, he runs Walleye Chad Charters. He's a great guy. He'll do charters basically wherever you want to go, really. He does the traditional Saginaw, Detroit, all over the place over there, of course. And he does mullet. He'll do Muskegon. He'll do West Michigan waters over here, Grand River. And summer, I think it's summer or late summer, he does some after work specials on the Grand River. And from talking with Chad on that one, he usually sticks with a lot of blade baits in the Grand River. And some of the people that have done that and I've talked to, they all really find that to be a really good time. It's really fun. I learned a lot about just blade baits, fishing blade baits in the Grand. So stay tuned for him next week. He's a great guy, full of knowledge, and he's willing to pass it along. So again, I thank you all for being patient with me on getting this done. Yeah. If you have any more questions, just keep them coming. Thanks.